Fresh off a devastating loss against The Rock at WrestleMania, John Cena was set on a redemption arc to finally overcome the Great One and in turn capture the WWE Championship. Cena's character didn't take much of a change throughout this time period, but as an all-around wrestler, he felt more seasoned. Cena was really coming into his own as a strong leader. He showed these qualities earlier on, but I feel like it kicked into overdrive after 2010 and 2013 was a prime example of what I'm talking about. This man started to lead matches and help his opponents follow his lead. His promos on the mic were effortless, and it felt like John Cena didn't see anything as challenging because of how much he had accomplished up to this point. And little did we know that this was basically his last run on top. So to set the stage, John Cena had gone through struggles throughout 2012. It's labeled as the worst year of his career, and as dramatic as it sounds, it was. Because he was running into misery every couple of weeks, and whenever he was close to glory, whether it's the WWE title or Money in the Bank, something would happen and he was back to square one. The way WWE made it out to be, it was like a year of hell, but it wasn't entirely that. For a star of Cena's stature, however, this was a bad year. It's like the Golden State Warriors getting eliminated in the first round of the playoffs, Real Madrid getting eliminated in the round of 16 in the Champions League, but this was of course done on purpose, to make 2013 a greater year for the face that runs the place. He won the Royal Rumble, which was pretty predictable, and I think we all knew where they were heading, and later that night, The Rock recaptured the WWE Championship for the first time in 11 years. This was all done to set up a clash in New York, technically New Jersey, between Rock and Cena, and against the once-in-a-lifetime tagline, but bank is bank. WrestleMania 29 was one of the most profitable events in wrestling history, and most of that is credited to the rematch between John Cena and The Rock. Cena was on a Rocky III-esque journey trying to overcome Mr. T, who had gotten in his head, brought him to the breaking point, which involved a lack of confidence and tragedy. Personally speaking, I would have preferred to see something else here because Rock isn't around all the time, but from a logical story, it made sense for the number one guy to exercise his demons. The match, though, and this is my opinion, left a lot to be desired. I believe Rock suffered an abdomen injury early on, and this ruined the match. It was a finisher fest done out of shock value, and I don't like finisher fest matches because they rely too much on finishers, but it was the only plan they had because that injury derailed the match. By the end of it, John Cena was once again WWE Champion. He received vindication in finally beating The Rock and completed his redemption arc set forth at the beginning of 2013. On the April 8th, 2013 episode of Raw, John Cena kicked off the show all hyped up. Now this was the rabid post-WrestleMania crowd, so you knew it was chaos. He was playing along with them and asked if they were upset about WrestleMania was over. Now of course they enjoyed when he talked trash about himself and started joking about doing a heel turn. The crowd was excited, and Cena said that he wasn't here to celebrate with balloons, he was here to fight and defend the title. Mark Henry interrupted. He's all serious, and Cena made a sexual chocolate reference. He admitted he was afraid to tell Henry that he has a breath of 1,000 asses and accepted the challenge. But then Booker T came out. He was running SmackDown, which was pretty irrelevant to Raw, but long story short, he said Rock was entitled to a rematch. That said, if Henry beats Cena, then he'll get his title shot. The world's strongest man told him to stop joking because all these jokes are going to make him into the Hall of Fame. That match ended up getting thrown sideways and Ryback made the save, only to drop Cena himself and make his intentions known. He wanted the WWE Championship. This was back when WWE knew they had to put on a big story right after WrestleMania. The pay-per-views were still $40 and they had to grab everyone's attention. It seems like ages ago, but there was a time where Ryback was considered the next WWE Champion. Unfortunately though, this heel turn took him a step away from that, which nobody really knew, but looking back in hindsight, it was clear that this was the beginning of the end. Ryback started calling himself the Ryback at this point and completely changed his demeanor. He blamed John Cena for his recent misfortunes, and the champ portrayed Ryback as a coward who turned down an opportunity and decided to take advantage of him behind his back. Then he complains about how everything is John Cena's fault, calling himself the biggest threat to the title. Does he know who he's dealing with? Ryback lacks a brain and balls. He didn't say exactly like that though. That's what he was implying. Cena told Ryback to make a move so he shows what it takes to be a champion. Ryback opted to walk away. And this is when the Shield came out. Both men had huge problems, more so with Ryback. They jumped Cena. Ryback looked on with zero emotion or hesitancy in his stance. This is exactly what he wanted, and Cena suffered. Ryback's ego was growing larger by the day. He didn't think anybody could match him and even provoked Mick Foley, who was ready for a fight. Cena told him to be prepared, and when it came time, he ended up making a save. Cena was ready. He's ready to fight, but the Shield came out, and this was his opportunity to do what Ryback did to him, and that's exactly what happened. But this time around, he made the save to take out Ryback himself and hit the AA. He was greatly upset by the situation and refused to go through it again, so he ended up walking out of the arena ahead of the main event tag team match with John Cena. This changed up things, and Cena went out there to team up with Team Hell No. Now you guys know, these 6-man tag team matches were the visual version of crack imported to our TVs. Shield always turned up like they were wrestling on pay-per-views, but heading into the match, John Cena had an ankle injury which was used against him, and the Shield won the match. Right afterwards, Ryback came out without a positive or negative emotion on his face, and this whole situation worked into his favor because he had an advantage for their title match at Extreme Rules. Cena still had no problem defending the title despite a heel injury, as he felt a responsibility to come into the ring and do his best. He hasn't been 100% since 2002, and this injury will not stop him from wrestling. Vicky Guerrero came out and introduced Ryback. Cena made jokes about him being all angry and annoyed over things, and Ryback talked about Cena's weakness being his pride and ego. After Extreme Rules, Ryback rules. The match stipulation was his choice, and he decided on a last man standing match. The big guy didn't spare Cena in the slightest and even took advantage of him trying to save Team Hell No from a Shield attack later that night. The following week, after a 6-man tag team match, Ryback ran down to the ring and blasted that already injured heel with a steel chair. And when asked about this, Ryback complained about how doing the right thing got him nowhere. Not anymore, and he said that everyone's gonna know Ryback rules. That's the build. It felt like they were taking it slow because this feud was set to last a bit longer. The match itself was just there. It's very forgettable, especially for our last man standing match. The whole thing lasted too long, although it deserved the time, because 20 plus minutes for a match like this is reasonable. It's just Ryback and John Cena wasn't the right match for this one. Very plotting and very uninteresting. The ending saw Ryback launch Cena through the pay-per-view set and in turn costing himself the match, as it ended with a double countout. Cena though was the one who needed medical attention, and there was no winner. Ryback the next night bragged about Cena being carried away, and he guaranteed John Cena won't refuse an ambulance next time around. Because Cena the previous night had refused an ambulance, he walked away on his own 2 feet. Ryback challenged Cena to an ambulance match for payback and promised that he'll send Cena to the hospital. This was no problem for the champ. Accepting such a challenge came naturally for him. Upon his return, John Cena looked anything but angry or frustrated. He said that both men had a right to claim victory over the other in the last man standing match. As for Ryback, Cena thought payback should be definitive, so he wanted a 3 stages of hell match, a lumberjack match, a tables match, and if there's a third fall, an ambulance match. And Cena promised that even if he wins the 2 falls in a row, he'll still send Ryback into the ambulance. The big guy came out and told Cena to say hello to Satan. Basically, he was warning him over what he was getting into. Now, Cena wasn't just busy with Ryback. Paul Heyman came out and wanted to send his client to the very top. After taking out Triple H the previous week, Heyman wanted Curtis Axel to face John Cena and challenged him to a match for later that night. He accepted. The big guy used this to his advantage and attacked Cena later that night. It wasn't a huge beating or anything like that, but it threw Cena off guard and Curtis Axel won by countout. It was much worse the following week though, in a no disqualification match. Both men were set to go face to face one final time ahead of payback, and it was heated. Cena of course had to force him to get to the ring because Ryback stood from a distance. The champ said that these lumberjacks are here to prevent him from running away on Sunday. Ryback claimed he stood there for Cena's sake, and he complained about how he should have been champion on 3 different occasions. When he made mention of Hell in a Cell last year, Cena added that he gave him his spot, which Ryback acknowledged was where the problem started. He became so popular that Cena went to Damage Control to protect his position. Things were heated between the two, and John Cena said that neither him nor the others that held this title had a guardian angel by their side, yet Ryback's here whining and blaming anybody else for his failures. Ryback said Cena has lost his mind and told him that his legend's gonna end in a 3 stages of hell match. It was about taking Cena's spot. The champ said payback's a bitch, and the lumberjacks pulled him away, leading to Ryback running in. These two were about to get into it right when the wrestlers separated them. This time around, the feud was much more heated and had direction, with Ryback holding resentment over Cena seemingly holding onto his spot selfishly. They gave the story more depth, but man, they shouldn't have done the feud. This version of Ryback was very cold compared to the white hot babyface version. Feed Me More was gone, and what made Ryback awesome was basically gone. He needed the comeback sequence, the shouting Feed Me More and all that. Anyways, the first fall was regular stuff. Lumberjacks got involved a bit. Cena hit a cool cross body onto the lumberjacks, and even though he had the momentum, the big guy quickly rebounded with a shell shock to win the first fall clean. The challenger dominated the second fall with a strong grip on the match, but ultimately Cena did what he does best and quickly bounced back with an AA through the table to win the second fall. The third fall was much more even, although as time went on, John Cena finally took control. He was throwing him through doors and even AA'd him through the ambulance to win the match. This still didn't hit. I'm not gonna lie myself, say, oh, I love this match. The problem was Ryback wasn't capable of hitting these long matches. The fact that he didn't have much chemistry with John Cena, they just did not click. It was the wrong time, wrong place for Ryback, especially the fact that he had to turn heel to become a challenger for John Cena, because other than Ryback, they didn't have many formidable opponents. They had Mark Henry. CM Punk was gone. He was back as a face. They just didn't have many opponents for John Cena, so Ryback had to turn heel. It just didn't work. I think it's pretty forgettable. I think of Ryback wearing the hat, talking about the Ryback, whatever. It's just not that memorable to me. Cena was looking forward and said that the next person who holds this title earns it. Then Mark Henry in a salmon suit comes in and teases retirement. He spoke about his past. gassed, shed some tears, but through it all, he was seeking a title shot. So he dropped John Cena, which was an absolute shocker. This caught everyone off guard. Henry just came in and dropped Cena like that to get a title shot. Everyone thought he was going to retire because of the rumors, the fact that he was crying and shedding tears about his career, but then he just drops John Cena. It was crazy. It was a great moment. It was an absolute shocker, the likes that many hadn't seen in years. This was one of the most shocking things WWE had done in the last couple of years at this time. The champ wasn't that upset over this. He understood that many did insane things to get the chance to challenge for the title, and Henry is a prime example of that. He teased retirement and made a mockery out of all the important moments in WWE by faking retirement. To Cena, Henry's running out of time. That's why he did something like this. The champ was ready for the challenge ahead, but Mark Henry still never went into detail why he chose that exact moment. The world's strongest man had great envy for the politics and dealing with the drama backstage. He thought that he contributed greatly to WWE and the fans, and so he deserved to be WWE champion. Now that he has the chance, he was going to do the right thing for himself. As for John Cena, Henry promised to beat his ass. Later that night, the #1 contender played mind games with Cena, who was exhausted and broken after his match with Alberto Del Rio. Their confrontation on the final Raw before Money in the Bank was deep. Mark Henry said that he has been waiting for 17 years. Cena made fun of him and made mention of a Snickers bar, but Henry was restrained and admitted the old him would have dropped him. But that wasn't the case and assured him that he was a new man. To Henry, it was about his legacy. He wins that title, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. Hell, he'll sell out his own family to win the title. Cena told him he better do it then. He acknowledged Henry was desperate and a win was necessary because if he doesn't win, everything's done. He's lost the respect of the fans. He's lost everything. Did he give a damn about this? Hell no. Cena's the one that cares about the fans. There's no line Henry would cross. So the champ told him to cross this line to get an ass whooping. Money in the Bank was what Mark Henry looked forward to. He already took a pay cut years ago. No way he's losing money now. A sample was in the cards though. Mark Henry made an example out of John Cena to stand tall. Better build than the Ryback one. I wish they explored the story more because it could have been deeper than the original in 2011. I liked it because Mark Henry was a dangerous monster with a huge weakness on his forehead. What was that weakness? He was desperate and it was radiating from him the entire time during this feud. It gave him a different depth. It showed a different side of Mark Henry. The WWE Championship was the difference between an incomplete career and an amazing one in his eyes. It validates his entire career and his trials of taking pay cuts, suffering more injuries than Paul George, and being treated as a joke despite his impressive size, stature, and weightlifting abilities. Their match at Money in the Bank is a hidden favorite of mine. I really was convinced Henry would win here. It was pretty close to SummerSlam, but everything seemed aligned for a title change. The big problem with the situation was timing. If this was in September, I'm sure things could have been different, would have been different. Let's talk about the match. Now, these matches aren't a foreign concept. Big guy slows the pace. Babyface feels like it's almost impossible to escape this challenge. Gets thrown around, but when it's well done, it stands out. They mixed it up with the modern-day main event style, and it was a great story of Henry doing whatever it takes, and Cena, on the other hand, was just running into problem after problem after problem. The main character here was Mark Henry. He looked so desperate despite having so much success. And for John Cena, yes, it was tough, but it was another night. He managed to overcome the world's strongest man to look forward to SummerSlam. Good match. I liked it. I recommend you watch if you haven't because it's actually one of Mark Henry's best matches in WWE. Of course, he was a late bloomer. It took him a while to get things going, become a better worker and all, but with John Cena here in the year of 2013, it clicked, it made sense. It was a good match. With that said, interestingly, John Cena was given the choice of choosing his opponent for the pay-per-view by the new GM Brad Maddox. The wrestlers worked extra hard to try to convince Cena that they should be his opponent, but instead of having an easy match, he opted to show for the fans and asked them to choose his opponent. They made their decision with one single word. Yes. Now, Daniel Bryan at the time was on a tremendous upswing that was getting heated as the days went by. It's a strange snowball effect that turned into one of the biggest stories in the last 10 years. But looking back on it, man, it's a bit strange. Cena teased many opponents, Heath Slater, 3MB, RVD, Fandango, but in the end, he chose Daniel Bryan. It's almost weird looking back how he was placed in this position. Did this man belong? Hell yeah, but it felt like WWE didn't see him that way. Nonetheless, he was going to get a big opportunity in the main event of SummerSlam. And time after time in his career, this man hasn't disappointed. And when you have a match, especially a match at SummerSlam, you need something fresh, a reliable performer, and Daniel Bryan fit the bill. Brad Maddox tried to drive a wedge between Cena and Bryan, adding fuel to the fire, claiming Cena chose him because he's an easy opponent. The American Dragon knew what Maddox was trying to do, and Cena acknowledged why he chose Bryan. He compared him to Eddie Guerrero and Shawn Michaels, guys that had passion. Bryan earned this match based on the merit of being one of the best, and being champion means somebody like Bryan has to challenge for the belt. They're that damn good. For Cena, it was about proving the best. Bryan isn't good enough. With zero hesitancy, he signed, and as he's about to talk, Maddox interrupted. He thought Bryan didn't deserve this title shot, and it was the Raw GM simply shining the echoes of management. He booked him in a match for the main event, and it was going to be a gauntlet match. The American Dragon went out there said he didn't want Cena's help and almost overcame the challenge, but Ryback got himself disqualified. Cena made the save and decided to challenge him to a tables match for next week. At the same time, Daniel Bryan's story was deeply rooted in preference. The boss himself, Mr. McMahon, didn't see a viable future with Daniel Bryan potentially on top. He lacked traditional marketing, lacked any standout features, and in general, they just didn't like him. His involvement also brought Bryan to admit his true feelings about John Cena. Vince thought Bryan didn't have ruthless aggression like Cena, and he preferred if Cena wasn't champion, but he definitely didn't want Daniel Bryan. Meanwhile, Cena dealt with Ryback only to be met with Bryan, who was toying with the title belt. Since the boss had no option, they tried to fit Bryan into a proper champion. Problem was, even though Bryan was willing to play their game, McMahon went the extra mile and told him to shave the beard. This brought nothing more than misery for McMahon, as Bryan ended up revolting and shaved a part of Wade Barrett's beard. So, the corporate thing wasn't working. What now? The leader of the Yes movement felt that Cena wasn't a good wrestler and he didn't waste time in responding. The fans chanted, "You can't wrestle," and Cena pivoted to the topic of Bryan losing. He thought it would crush his ego to fall down at SummerSlam. Then Randy Orton came out. He said that it didn't matter who won the match between Bryan and Cena, what mattered was what happened afterwards. The point in all of this was that Cena better watch out. Ironic considering the Shield interrupted. Daniel Bryan evened things up and these three teamed up in the main event, and Randy Orton made sure to let them know that he wasn't a friend. Hell, he almost cashed in the briefcase, but the Shield prevented that. There's already enough drama as it is with the SummerSlam main event, but then Triple H made himself the special guest referee for the title match. John Cena and Daniel Bryan's problems made their way to Miz TV. The champion John Cena acknowledged that the only issue between himself and Bryan is the WWE Championship. That's all. The Miz was doing the same thing that others did and tried to add some drama to the segment. Bryan threatened to punch him in the face. Now, Cena didn't have a problem, but Bryan did. He said that Cena's superficial. He's here for the glory and the fame, not the wrestling. Bryan said that this shirt is a parody of Cena's. Why? Because John Cena is a parody of wrestling. He was in it for the challenge. He wanted to be considered the best. John Cena, not so much. The champ got all serious and said that this shirt is deeper than Bryan thinks. It represents the struggles he faced in the ring, and he's an inspiration for the kids. Cena did a good job of establishing the WWE title as a great burden. He mentioned a bunch of names, and Daniel Bryan took offense because Cena was basically saying, hey, he didn't belong in that class. And he admitted that he told him that if he's good enough to hold this, then he'll earn his respect. And this was all that Daniel Bryan wanted to hear. He saw this as Cena looking at him as somebody beneath him. For him, it's another SummerSlam. Bryan, on the other hand, is the biggest match of his life. He wished to slap him in the face, but didn't deserve it because he wasn't a wrestler, you know? It's like, oh, you're not a real wrestler. You do not deserve to get slapped. Tempers were high and Triple H had to quickly defuse the situation. Even Randy Orton came out. This was the strongest build in the title arena. Daniel Bryan had a deep appreciation and love for wrestling. He found much success but was never put in such a grand position. The WWE title in the main event of SummerSlam. I loved it. Heading into the match, Cena had a swollen shoulder. I remember at the time thinking the corporation was coming back. I was almost convinced that John Cena would turn heel as well, but the corporation thing had to do with the McMahons and Triple H being around. With that said, SummerSlam was amazing. This was one of John Cena's best matches as well as Bryan's. The champ worked as the designated heel. Bryan was shown to be extremely resilient in a big fight environment and had an answer to everything John Cena threw at him, and it was a great way to establish him in the main event scene because this man's first order of business was to beat the very best that WWE had to offer. It wasn't like he was climbing up the ladder and Cena was the final boss. In his story, he was the first. Bryan debuted a brand new move, Kenta's knee. And he had it in the indies, but for WWE, it was the first time. And this was enough for the victory. He beat Cena clean. It was a fresh finish, and I know, Cena was a bit injured, but it doesn't really take away from the story because everything else was on point. The LA crowd, the high stakes, the setting, everything. He earned Cena's respect, and beating him earned him the honor of being a made man in WWE. But as you guys know, Money in the Bank's a thing. Alright, overall, John Cena's title reign here compared to his previous ones was pretty strong. You know, don't let the Ryback story trick you. John Cena was in his element at this point. Was 2013 his best year? No, but it was certainly one of his best years. And the reason why is because he was strong all around. He was on point. There wasn't many moments where Cena underperformed himself. There just wasn't. The reason why I like it compared to other title reigns is, as I said, as an all-around talent, John Cena was on point. He knew what he was doing here. He had the experience. He was probably at his peak in ring. With that said, the best match on here has to be the Daniel Bryan match. No contest. Best promo, the one with Bryan before SummerSlam on Miz TV. I thought that was good. He tried to tell Bryan, like, you're good, but at the end of the day, you have to beat me to be considered one of the very best. I love that promo. It was pretty damn good, so yeah. Alright, what you guys think of the title room? Please comment down below. That's it for this video. Make sure you hit the STF on the like button or perhaps the AA on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.